For weeks, a gnawing unease settled in my stomach, a persistent whisper that something wasn't right. Haley had always been punctual, a creature of habit and her routine. We'd shared a life that revolved around simple pleasures, dinner at 6, evenings on the couch with a movie, and lazy weekends filled with laughter and exploration. But lately, that rhythm was disrupted. It started subtly. A half hour here, an hour there. Haley's excuses were always harmless at first, meetings that ran late, unexpected projects, and the occasional work dinner. I wanted to believe her, but each time she came home later, I felt a strange heaviness settle in my chest as if a weight was slowly compressing my heart. The evenings grew longer and quieter without her, and I found myself checking the clock obsessively. I'd sit at the dining table, waiting for the familiar sound of the key turning in the lock, only to be met with silence. When she finally did come home, her smile felt forced, her laughter strained. It was as if she was wearing a mask, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the woman I loved was slipping further and further away. Then there was her phone. It became a constant source of anxiety. It buzzed and chirped with incoming messages at all hours. I'd see her pick it up, glance at the screen, and then return it to her pocket with an odd expression. There were moments when I caught her texting, her face illuminated by the blue light, and a pang of jealousy shot through me. Who was she talking to? What was so important that she couldn't share it with me? At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. After all, we had a solid relationship, didn't we? Yet, the more I tried to dismiss my worries, the stronger they grew. I began to find myself in a spiral of suspicion, playing scenarios in my head. What if she was having an affair? It was a dark thought, but it crept into my mind more often than I liked. One fateful evening, as I sat on the couch with a cold beer in hand, I heard her phone buzz again. This time, she was in the shower, and the sound of her laughter echoed from the bathroom. I glanced over at her phone, illuminated on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a new message. My heart raced as I picked it up, feeling the thrill of betrayal before I even read the words. As I unlocked the phone, a combination of her birth date and the last 4 digits of our home phone number, I felt a surge of adrenaline. There, on the screen, was a message thread with our neighbor, Jake. The messages were filled with playful emojis, flirty banter, and words that dripped with intimacy. I felt my breath hitch in my throat as I scrolled through the conversation, each line sending a jolt of agony through me. Can't wait to see you tonight, handsome. Wish you were here instead of at that boring meeting. Read one message, followed by another. You make me feel alive in a way I haven't felt in years. The words pierced through my heart like a dagger. I felt the world around me tilt and fade, leaving only the painful reality of what I was witnessing. I was frozen in place. A tidal wave of emotions crashing over me, anger, betrayal, and a deep, wrenching sadness. My hands trembled as I read line after line, the intimate details of their exchanges that made it clear they were more than just neighbors, they were lovers. My heart was in freefall, and the shock left me feeling lightheaded. How could she do this to me? To us? The very foundation of our life together crumbled beneath my feet as I grasped the weight of her betrayal. The laughter that had once filled our home was now replaced with the deafening sound of silence. When Haley emerged from the shower, I quickly set the phone back down, trying to mask the turmoil that churned inside me. I looked at her, forcing a smile that felt foreign on my lips, yet my insides were twisted with rage and sorrow. How was I going to confront her? What words could capture the betrayal I felt? At that moment, the certainty of my suspicions morphed into a visceral truth. I had discovered the unthinkable, and the pain was suffocating. But I was not ready to react just yet. I needed to think, to plan. I would not let her know that I was aware of her treachery. I would gather my strength, and then I would make my move. The days following my discovery felt like a slow, tortuous crawl through time. Each moment spent in the same house with Haley felt like an exercise in restraint. I couldn't let on that I knew about her affair. I had to play my cards right. My mind raced as I considered my options. I could confront her, scream, and rage against the injustice of it all. But that would only give her the upper hand. Instead, I decided to take a different approach, one that would keep me in control and allow me to gather my thoughts. The idea of hosting a barbecue sprang to mind, almost as if it were divinely inspired. It would be a perfect cover, a way to bring together our friends and neighbors, including her lover, without raising any suspicions. The thought of seeing their expressions when they realized what I was orchestrating filled me with a grim sense of satisfaction. It was cold, calculated, and utterly satisfying. I wanted them both to feel the weight of their choices, to experience the public humiliation that was long overdue. So, I sent out the invitations, casual but firm, making it clear that I expected everyone to be there. "Join us for a barbecue at our place this Saturday," I wrote. "We'll have plenty of food and drinks, so bring your appetite." I even included a line about how I'd love to see everyone together for a fun evening. Little did they know the storm that was brewing beneath my cheerful facade. As the day approached, I spent hours planning every detail. I wanted everything to be perfect, not for them, but for me. I envisioned the evening in my mind, from the sounds of laughter to the clinking of glasses. I imagined myself standing at the grill, flipping burgers while Haley mingled with our neighbors, her laughter ringing through the air like a mocking belly. The day of the barbecue arrived, and I threw myself into the preparations with fierce determination. I headed to the local grocery store early in the morning, stocking up on everything I might need: meats, vegetables, condiments, and drinks. I carefully selected cuts of steak and sausages, thinking of how they would sizzle on the grill, filling the air with mouth-watering aromas. I wanted everything to be perfect, every detail meticulously planned, from the appetizers to the dessert. As I loaded the bags into my car, I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. It was exhilarating to think that I was taking control of the situation. Back at home, I started setting up the backyard, arranging tables and chairs beneath the shade of the large oak tree. I hung colorful string lights, ensuring the ambiance would be inviting yet slightly off-kilter, reflecting the hidden tension that would underlie the evening. With each passing hour, I prepared the food and laid out the drinks, imagining the looks on Haley's and Jake's faces when the truth would finally come to light. The more I thought about it, the more my heart raced with anticipation. Would they realize it was a trap? Would they panic? I could hardly contain my excitement at the thought of their discomfort. As I marinated the steaks and grilled the veggies, my mind was a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. Part of me felt exhilarated at the prospect of revenge, while another part of me wrestled with the looming sadness of my crumbling marriage. I loved Haley, or at least, I had thought I did. Now, it was hard to separate the memories of our happier times from the bitter reality of her betrayal. I filled a cooler with ice and drinks, carefully selecting each one. I wanted everything to be just right. As I prepped, I envisioned how Haley would glance at her lover across the yard, how she'd try to keep her composure while knowing that I was fully aware of their secret. The thought of it made me smile. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the yard, I arranged the table with bright plates and napkins, the colors contrasting against the heavy atmosphere. I took a moment to stand back and admire my work. The scene looked idyllic, families laughing, kids playing, the smell of grilled meat wafting through the air. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Finally, as the time approached for our guests to arrive, I felt a rush of nervous energy. I was ready. I was prepared to confront the truth, to lay bare the deception that had infiltrated my home. This barbecue wasn't just a casual gathering, it was my stage, and I was about to reveal the play that would change everything. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over our backyard, the first neighbors began to arrive. I stood by the grill, flipping burgers and watching with anticipation as familiar faces emerged from their cars, laughter echoing across the street. My heart raced with a blend of excitement and tension. I welcomed each guest with a smile, eager to engage them in cheerful small talk while secretly reveling in the knowledge that this evening would unravel everything for Haley and Jake. The Johnsons were the first to arrive, their 2 children racing ahead to the backyard, squealing in delight at the sight of the grill and the array of food laid out on the picnic table. I greeted them warmly, exchanging pleasantries while secretly gauging Haley's reaction from the corner of my eye. She stood just inside the house, her posture rigid and her expression tightly controlled. It was as if she could sense the underlying tension in the air, and I could almost see the gears turning in her mind as she tried to process the situation. As more guests arrived, the atmosphere shifted from my carefully curated anticipation to a lively buzz of conversation. I engaged with everyone, recounting funny stories and sharing laughter, all while keeping an eye on Haley. I could feel her discomfort radiating like heat waves from her body. The tension was palpable. Then came Jake, her lover, strolling into the yard with a casual smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He approached the grill, clearly trying to blend in, but I could see the nervous energy crackling around him. He was dressed in a casual t-shirt and jeans, the type of attire that screamed "I'm just here to enjoy a barbecue," but the way he kept glancing around told a different story. It was evident he felt the weight of the situation as he exchanged pleasantries with the other guests. I couldn't help but note how his eyes darted toward Haley, seeking reassurance. "Hey, Nick, everything looks amazing," Jake said, his voice a little too loud, as if trying to cover the tension with enthusiasm. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt both cold and calculated. "Thanks, Jake, just trying to create a great atmosphere for everyone." My reply was casual, but my heart raced. I was acutely aware of Haley standing a few feet away, trying to maintain her composure while the situation spiraled beyond her control. I watched as Haley forced herself to join the group, exchanging pleasantries with the other neighbors, her laughter sounding hollow in my ears. She wore a bright summer dress, one that I had told her I loved. But tonight it felt like a costume rather than a representation of her true self. She made an effort to engage with the Johnsons and the Thompsons, but I could see her stealing glances at Jake, anxiety flickering across her face. The dynamic of the evening was shifting with each new arrival, and I could sense that both Haley and Jake were keenly aware of the game I was playing. As the evening progressed, the laughter grew louder, the atmosphere warmer, but the undercurrent of tension was unmistakable. I poured drinks, handed out plates, and chatted with the neighbors while positioning myself to keep an eye on both Haley and Jake. I made sure to include everyone in conversations, steering topics toward lighthearted subjects, family vacations, sports, and local events. But beneath the surface, I felt like a puppeteer, pulling strings and orchestrating the impending reveal. Then, a moment came when I glanced at Haley and Jake, their eyes locking for a brief second, a silent communication passing between them that I couldn't quite decipher. It was a fleeting moment, but I noticed the way Haley's smile faltered as she registered my gaze upon them. I reveled in that moment, knowing they were both acutely aware of the facade they were trying to maintain. As darkness descended and the string lights flickered on, casting a soft glow over the yard, I could feel the anticipation building within me. I knew that soon, the laughter and cheer would be replaced by discomfort and tension as I revealed the truth to everyone gathered. The evening had been carefully choreographed, and now all I had to do was wait for the right moment to pull back the curtain on Haley's betrayal. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and the sizzling of the grill, I felt an unsettling mix of triumph and sadness. This was my home, a place where love had once flourished, now transformed into a battleground for truth. With every clink of a glass and every cheerful exchange, I reminded myself that soon, very soon, the truth would surface, and Haley and Jake would have nowhere to hide. As the evening wore on, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a twilight glow across the backyard. The sound of laughter mingled with the sizzling of the grill and the clinking of glasses, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. But beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, a storm was brewing, a storm that only I could see. I felt the energy in the air shift, the laughter taking on a nervous edge as I prepared to make my move. I had been waiting for the perfect moment to deliver my toast. And as the chatter began to ebb, I sensed that the time had come. I stepped away from the grill, my heart pounding with anticipation. I took a deep breath, allowing the weight of the moment to settle over me. I could feel the eyes of my guests turning toward me, curiosity mingling with the residual warmth of the barbecue. "Hey everyone, can I have your attention for a moment?" I called out, raising my glass high. The crowd gradually quieted, and a few of my neighbors turned to face me, smiles lingering on their faces. Haley stood a little off to the side, her demeanor tense but trying her best to maintain her composure. Jake, her lover, shifted uncomfortably next to her, his eyes darting between the crowd and the ground. As I surveyed the faces before me, I felt a surge of confidence. This was my moment, not just to celebrate the neighbors but to bring Haley's deception into the light. I could see anticipation mixed with apprehension on their faces, and it only fueled my resolve. I raised my glass higher, allowing the light from the string bulbs to reflect off the surface, capturing the attention of everyone present. "I'd like to make a toast," I announced, my voice steady, "to the wonderful relationships we share in this neighborhood. It's a true blessing to have great neighbors who look out for one another." I paused, letting the words hang in the air, a deceptive layer of sincerity covering my intentions. And, to the beautiful bonds that form between good neighbors, I continued, my heart racing as I delivered the punchline of my toast. Those relationships that go beyond mere proximity, relationships that can spark joy and bring people closer together. The room erupted into laughter, the sound ringing out like music under the twinkling lights. But I focused on Haley and Jake, noting the way their faces paled at the underlying implications of my words. Haley's laughter faltered, a flicker of realization flashing in her eyes. I couldn't help but take satisfaction in the moment. It felt as though time slowed, the laughter of the others fading into a dull roar as I locked eyes with them. I had played the perfect hand, and now the stakes were high. Their expressions shifted from amusement to horror, and for a fleeting second, I savored the realization that they both understood exactly what I was doing. My heart raced with a mix of triumph and exhilaration, a powerful rush of emotions flooding through me. I felt empowered, standing before my neighbors like an actor on stage, reveling in the performance. To great neighbors, I concluded, raising my glass even higher, urging everyone to join in the toast. The guests clinked their glasses together, unaware of the storm brewing just beneath the surface of my seemingly light-hearted words. Haley and Jake exchanged anxious glances, their discomfort palpable. I could almost see the gears turning in their minds, scrambling to piece together how I had turned a simple gathering into a stage for their unraveling. As the toast concluded and everyone began to sip their drinks, I felt a wave of satisfaction wash over me. I had pulled off the perfect act, exposing the truth while shrouding it in the guise of camaraderie. I took a sip of my drink, allowing the cool liquid to flow down my throat, a stark contrast to the heat building in my chest. The laughter continued, but I could sense a shift in the atmosphere. What had begun as a joyous gathering now felt charged with an unspoken tension. I noticed a few guests stealing glances at Haley and Jake, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion as they sensed something was off. It was a small but significant shift that added to my sense of triumph. I watched Haley struggle to maintain her composure, her facade beginning to crack. The way she plastered a smile on her face, though it didn't reach her eyes, was both heartbreaking and infuriating. It was clear she was trying to play her part, but the weight of her secret loomed larger than ever. The night stretched on, laughter mingling with the tension in the air. I reveled in the chaos I had stirred, knowing that the full extent of my plan was yet to unfold. Haley's nerves were fraying, and Jake's anxious energy was palpable. I could feel it, the atmosphere crackling with the anticipation of what was to come. As the evening deepened, I took a moment to reflect on the path that had led me here. I had crafted a stage for the truth to shine, and now all I had to do was wait for the right moment to unleash the storm I had built. My heart raced with anticipation, knowing that the revelations were only just beginning. As the evening unfolded, I could feel a sense of power surging within me. Fueled by the fear and discomfort radiating from Haley and Jake, every laugh from our neighbors felt like a cover, a fragile veil over the truth that I was determined to expose. My heart raced with anticipation, the intoxicating blend of control and vengeance coursing through my veins. I was no longer just the hurt husband, I was the conductor of this symphony of revelations, and the music was about to crescendo. Haley, sensing the energy shift, tried desperately to put on a brave face. Her forced smile was a mask, one that cracked under the pressure of her guilt. She began to mingle more, attempting to steer the conversations away from the unease that had settled around her like a thick fog. But her efforts were futile. I was watching her every move, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. "Isn't this weather just perfect for a barbecue?" she said brightly, forcing the words out as she turned to our neighbor, Mrs. Thompson. "I love this time of year, it's so lovely to get everyone together." Her laughter was strained, and I could see her glancing at Jake, searching for support amid the rising tension. But I wasn't about to let her deflect. With a sly smile curling my lips, I stepped into the fray, eager to amplify her discomfort. "Oh, come on, Haley. It's not just the weather that makes this evening perfect, is it?" I said, my tone dripping with sarcasm. The air thickened with a charged silence as everyone turned their attention to us. Haley's eyes widened, a flicker of panic flashing across her face. "What do you mean, Nick?" she asked, her voice faltering slightly. I could see her muscles tense as she braced herself for the impending storm. "Oh, I continued, my voice playful yet biting. "You've been spending so much time with our dear neighbor, Jake, lately. I can't help but wonder how you manage to squeeze in all those late nights while pretending everything is normal." I could feel the heat of my words reverberate through the air, and I watched with glee as the color drained from her face. Jake shifted uncomfortably, trying to appear casual, but the anxiety was etched all over his features. "Nick, come on, man. It's just friendly neighbor stuff. Haley helps me with the gardening and," he stammered, but his voice trailed off under the weight of my gaze. "Gardening?" I scoffed, a chuckle escaping my lips. "That's rich. I'd never realized it took so many late-night garden parties to keep up with the weeds." I turned my gaze back to Haley, relishing the way her composure cracked with each probing question. She forced a laugh, the sound hollow and strained. "Nick, you know how much I love helping the neighbors. It's just community spirit, right?" Her attempt to downplay the situation felt desperate, and I could see how her anxiety was spilling over into her voice. "Community spirit?" I repeated, emphasizing each word with exaggerated delight. "That's one way to put it. But, Haley, how much time do you spend with Jake when you're helping him? I can't imagine you two just sharing gardening tips." At this point, my heart was racing, each question igniting a thrill of wicked pleasure within me. The other guests looked on, some exchanging glances, their expressions shifting from confusion to a dawning realization. It was as if the room was slowly awakening to the truth that had been lurking in the shadows. Haley's laughter faltered completely, replaced by a fragile silence. She looked at me, her eyes wide with fear and indignation. "Nick, stop it. This isn't funny." Her voice rose, and for a moment, I caught a glimpse of the woman I had once loved, a woman now ensnared in a web of her own making. But I wasn't done yet. "Not funny? Oh, come on. I'm just trying to understand how your friendship blossomed so beautifully. Perhaps we can all get together sometime, maybe a double date? Just the four of us? How does that sound?" I raised my glass mockingly, and a few of our guests joined in on the laughter, sensing the tension and joining the twisted game I had initiated. "Nick, this is ridiculous," Haley snapped, her voice trembling. "You're making a scene." But her words were met with more laughter, and I reveled in it. The joy I derived from her discomfort only strengthened my resolve. I could see the cracks forming in her facade and the way she struggled to maintain her composure while desperately trying to navigate the conversation. Each question I posed was a nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed lies. "Ridiculous? Is it ridiculous to want the truth?" I leaned in closer, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, relishing the moment. "Tell me, Haley, how does it feel to lie to everyone here? To pretend like everything is fine when the reality is so different?" The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. I could feel the weight of their collective gaze resting on Haley, the truth now laid bare before everyone. Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, it seemed as if the gravity of her situation had finally caught up with her. As I stood there, fueled by a mix of vindication and sorrow, I knew that this was just the beginning. The climax of the evening had arrived, and with it, the unraveling of everything I had once held dear. The thrill of control surged within me, a fierce reminder that the truth could no longer be hidden. Haley and Jake had been exposed, and the evening was just beginning to reveal its true colors. As I stood in the center of the backyard, a whirlwind of emotions surged within me. The laughter had dimmed, replaced by a palpable tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. I scanned the faces of my neighbors, searching for signs of their reactions, and what I saw filled me with a sense of wicked satisfaction. Some of them wore expressions of shock, eyes wide as they processed the unfolding drama. Others, however, were less discreet in their reactions. I caught sight of Mrs. Thompson, her hand clasped over her mouth, stifling a grin that threatened to escape. It was a look I had never expected to see from her. The sweet, unassuming neighbor was now caught between amusement and disbelief. The realization that she found the situation somewhat entertaining emboldened me further. Then there was Tom, the husband of the Johnsons, standing off to the side with his arms crossed, his brow furrowed in disapproval. His gaze fixed on Jake, burning with an intensity that spoke volumes. I could see the wheels turning in his mind, the judgment playing out on his face. Tom had always been a man of principles, and watching him scrutinize my neighbor sent a ripple of satisfaction through me. I savored the knowledge that not only was I shining a light on Haley's betrayal, but I was also compelling others to question their trust in her. What a tangled web we weave, huh? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm as I glanced around the gathering. I could feel the power of the moment surging through me, each chuckle and furrowed brow feeding my growing confidence. Sometimes, it takes a good barbecue to reveal the truths we hide behind our smiles. Some neighbors exchanged knowing glances, their laughter now tinged with an uneasy edge. It was a delicate dance of social dynamics unfolding before my eyes, and I was in the center of it, the orchestrator of this revealing performance. A few men nodded knowingly, their expressions shifting from concern to that familiar gleam of judgment that often surfaces in situations like this. The air crackled with unspoken thoughts, and I relished every moment of it. The collective reaction of the neighbors was intoxicating. I could see them grappling with the uncomfortable truth of Haley's deception, their faces a mixture of disbelief and fascination. I glanced back at Haley, whose earlier bravado had completely evaporated. Her cheeks flushed crimson, and the facade of composure she had worked so hard to maintain was crumbling rapidly. The laughter had faded, and in its place was a heavy silence, filled with the weight of her shame. "Nick, this isn't fair," Haley exclaimed, her voice strained as she turned to address the gathering. "You're making this a public spectacle." Her words fell flat, met with a mixture of awkward laughter and sympathetic glances from those who had witnessed her unraveling. "Public spectacle?" I echoed, raising an eyebrow as I directed my attention back to her. "Isn't that the reality we're facing here? It seems only fitting to address it in front of our friends and neighbors. After all, they deserve to know the truth about the people living right next door." At that moment, I saw a flicker of guilt pass through a couple of the guests. Their expressions suggested they were torn between empathy for Haley and a deeper understanding of the betrayal she had orchestrated. The tension was electric, and I reveled in the awareness that the community was witnessing a dramatic unraveling of the very fabric of trust. "Come on, Haley," I pressed on, enjoying the way her discomfort simmered in the air. "You've always been the social butterfly, the one who brought everyone together for barbecues and gatherings. Isn't it a bit hypocritical to now cry foul when the spotlight shines on you?" The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for her response. I could see the wheels turning in the minds of the other neighbors as they processed everything. Some of them shifted uncomfortably, while others exchanged glances filled with both intrigue and disdain. I noticed a few smiles creeping in, amusement dancing in their eyes as they navigated the complicated dynamics of the situation. Just then, Mrs. Johnson leaned in closer to her husband, whispering something that made him chuckle softly. It was a subtle gesture, but it ignited something within me. I was not just confronting Haley, I was challenging the very norms of our social fabric, dismantling the facade that so many had relied on for years. "Isn't it interesting how quickly the facade can fall?" I said, addressing the crowd again. "We often think we know our neighbors, but sometimes we're merely scratching the surface of the lives they lead." I paused, allowing the words to sink in, relishing the collective realization dawning on them. Jake, caught in the middle of this swirling chaos, finally found his voice, albeit weakly. "Nick, this is going too far. We're all friends here, right?" His attempt at appealing to the camaraderie felt desperate, almost laughable in the context of the evening. "Friends?" I shot back, raising my glass as if to toast to his words. "What a lovely word. But tell me, Jake, how does one define friendship? Is it built on honesty and trust, or is it merely a veil behind which we can hide our indiscretions?" The murmurs grew louder, a mix of astonishment and quiet agreement rippling through the crowd. I could see the discomfort written all over Haley's face, and it filled me with a deep sense of gratification. The tension that had settled around us felt electric, charged with the revelations of the night. At that moment, I realized that I had not just exposed Haley's infidelity, I had peeled back the layers of pretense that had enveloped our entire neighborhood. With every glance, every shifting expression, I felt the community's pulse quicken, united in the uncomfortable truth we were now forced to confront. This wasn't just about Haley or Jake anymore, it was about the collective acknowledgement of betrayal, the fragility of trust, and the reality that our lives were interwoven in ways we had taken for granted. As I took a deep breath, basking in the energy of the moment, I knew that I had set the stage for something far greater than I had ever anticipated, a reckoning for all of us. As the evening drew to a close, the laughter and chatter began to fade, giving way to a somber silence that hung in the air. Neighbors slowly gathered their things, the festive atmosphere now tinged with an unmistakable sense of unease. I watched them leave, their faces a mix of disbelief and contemplation as they processed the night's revelations. It felt as if I were watching the aftermath of a storm, the debris of relationships scattered all around. Haley lingered near the grill, her posture stiff and her expression a mixture of defiance and regret. She was desperately attempting to find the right words, searching for a way to bridge the chasm that had opened between us. I could see the flickers of anger and sorrow playing across her face, emotions warring within her as she struggled to reclaim her narrative. "Nick, please, can we talk?" she began, her voice cracking slightly. The remnants of her earlier bravado were gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability that felt almost foreign to me. I could hear the desperation lacing her words, a stark contrast to the confident woman who had flaunted her secret so carelessly. I turned to her, the cool evening air sending a chill down my spine. "Talk?" I replied, my tone laced with sarcasm. "What's left to say, Haley? You've said more than enough for a lifetime." My heart raced as I faced her, a mixture of relief and anger bubbling beneath the surface. I was not the man she had deceived any longer. I was the one who had taken back the power, and I intended to hold on to it. "Nick, I never meant for it to happen like this," she continued, her voice trembling. "I was just what?" I interrupted, my words cutting through the tension like a knife. "Just looking for excitement? Just want something different? You've shattered any trust we had, and now you want to talk about it?" The anger in my voice felt cathartic, each word a release of the pent-up frustration that had been building within me since the moment I discovered her betrayal. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words faltered as she realized the weight of her actions hung heavily in the air between us. I could see her struggling to formulate an apology, to piece together a justification, but none of it mattered anymore. The damage was done, and the consequences were irrevocable. "I don't want to hear excuses," I said, my voice firm. "I don't need a wife who chooses her neighbors over me. I've spent too long accepting your lies, and I won't continue to pretend that everything is fine when it's not." The finality in my tone echoed in the night, and I could feel the shift in the atmosphere as if the universe itself was aligning with my decision. Haley flinched at my words, her expression shifting to one of disbelief. "Nick, please, we can work through this. I know I messed up, but I love you." Her eyes glistened with tears, but I felt no pity. This wasn't about love, it was about betrayal and the realization that the woman I thought I knew was nothing more than an illusion. "Love? You think this is about love?" I scoffed, taking a step closer to her, feeling the weight of the moment bearing down on us. "You shattered that the moment you decided to betray our vows. Love isn't just a word, Haley. It's built on trust and respect, two things you've completely disregarded." I watched as her shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of her as she processed the gravity of her situation. At that moment, I felt a flicker of satisfaction, knowing that she understood the enormity of what she had lost. "Gather your things," I said, the finality in my voice ringing clear. "I don't want to share a home with someone who has so little regard for our marriage. I deserve better, and so do you." The words felt powerful, a decisive closing of a chapter I had never wanted to write. "Nick, don't do this," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I can change. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." The desperation in her tone was palpable, and for a moment, I hesitated, but only for a moment. I had seen enough, the mask had slipped, and I couldn't pretend that her pleas were anything but self-serving. "No, Haley," I replied, my voice steady. "This isn't about fixing things, it's about recognizing that what we had is gone. You've chosen your path, and now you must face the consequences." With those final words, I turned away, not wanting to witness the fallout any longer. The air was thick with unspoken words, the weight of our shattered dreams hanging heavily around us. I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief as I walked away, knowing that I was reclaiming my life. As I stepped back into the house, I could still hear her voice behind me, calling out in desperation, but it faded into the background, a distant echo of a life I was no longer willing to accept. I closed the door behind me, shutting out the turmoil of the evening and embracing the quiet that enveloped me. At that moment, I realized I was free from the lies, the pain, and the betrayal. I took a deep breath, the air filling my lungs with the promise of a new beginning. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly be difficult, I knew I would find my way, stronger and more resolute than ever. The evening had been a reckoning, a painful but necessary step towards reclaiming my life and my dignity. And as I stood there in the silence of our home, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The past would always be a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was ready to embrace the future, whatever it held, knowing that I had finally taken control of my narrative. In the months that followed the fateful evening of the barbecue, I found myself grappling with a profound sense of mistrust that seeped into every corner of my life. Haley's betrayal had shattered not only our marriage but also my ability to connect with other women. Each time I met someone new, I couldn't shake the feeling that they might be hiding a darker truth behind a smile. It was as if a veil had been lifted, exposing the fragility of relationships and the potential for deceit lurking beneath the surface. The innocence I once felt when it came to love and trust had been stripped away, leaving me feeling vulnerable and cautious. Despite my efforts to move on, Haley's memory lingered like a haunting melody that refused to fade. The love we once shared felt like a distant echo, and yet, it still had a hold on my heart. I found myself reminiscing about the good times, the laughter, and the moments that had brought us joy. It was as if a part of me remained tethered to her, a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. Even as I tried to forge new connections, the ghost of our relationship loomed large, casting a shadow over my ability to fully engage with others. Each time I encountered a woman who reminded me of Haley, be it her laughter, her mannerisms, or even her smile, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. There was a pull towards familiarity, a desire to recreate the love I had lost, but it was always tempered by the fear of betrayal. I would often find myself withdrawing, erecting walls to protect my heart from the pain of potential heartbreak. The irony was not lost on me. I was caught in a cycle of yearning for connection while simultaneously pushing it away, trapped by the very memories that haunted me. Haley remained etched in my mind as a symbol of love turned sour. I struggled to reconcile the woman I had adored with the person who had shattered my trust. Whenever I thought of her, it was accompanied by a rush of emotions, anger, sadness, and a lingering affection that I couldn't quite extinguish. I had wanted to believe that our love was genuine and that the bond we shared was unbreakable. Yet, the reality of her actions twisted that belief into something tainted, a painful reminder that even the strongest connections could fray under the weight of betrayal. As I moved forward, I realized that healing would be a journey, one that required confronting the scars Haley had left behind. I began to understand that my inability to trust again was a reflection of the deep wounds within me rather than a judgment of the women I encountered. While Haley's presence in my heart might always be complicated, it also pushed me to grow and redefine my understanding of love. In time, I hope to find a way to trust again, to open my heart without fear, and perhaps one day to discover a love that felt safe and true, free from the shadows of the past.